You don't hear the door slam. There's no dramatic bang like in the movies. No echo rolling down the hallway. Just a heavy, dull sound, metal ceiling shut, followed by a quiet click that feels almost insignificant. But your body reacts instantly. Your chest tightens. Your breathing slows. Your mouth goes dry. Because even if the sound is small, your instincts understand exactly what it means. You're locked in. This is your first night in a U.S. jail. And according to inmates, officers, and decades of jailhouse reality, it's the most dangerous night you'll ever face behind bars. Not because of riots. Not because of gangs. Not because of long-term enemies. But because right now, you don't know how this place works. And everyone else does. The cell smells wrong. Not just dirty, wrong. A mix of disinfectant, sweat, concrete, and something metallic you can't quite identify. The air feels stale, heavy, like it's been recycled too many times. Above you, a fluorescent light hums softly, flickering just enough to remind you it could go out at any moment. You're holding a thin mattress roll and a blanket that feels more like paper than fabric. No one tells you where to put them. The officer who walked you in didn't explain anything. No warning. No instructions. Just a gesture toward the cell and footsteps fading down the corridor. You're alone, but you don't feel alone, because you can feel the eyes. Somewhere beyond the bars, someone is watching, listening, studying how you move, how you stand, how long it takes you to decide where to sit. They're not judging who you were on the outside. They're judging who you are right now. And right now, you're new. The first thing jail takes from you is your sense of time. You don't know if it's night or early morning. You don't know how long you've been awake. You don't know when you'll sleep again. The second thing it takes is your identity. Your clothes are gone. Your phone is gone. Your name is replaced by a number. By the time you reach housing, you're already disoriented. And disorientation is dangerous inside jail. Because confusion looks like weakness. And weakness is noticed immediately. The noise never fully stops. Someone is coughing down the tier. Someone else is yelling. Maybe at a wall. Maybe at a voice only they can hear. A toilet flushes violently. Metal clanks against metal. Footsteps echo, then disappear. Underneath it all is a low murmur of voices. You can't hear the words clearly, but you know they're not meant for you. They're meant for people who already understand the rules. This is your first test. Not a physical one, not yet. A psychological one. The first night behind bars is dangerous because it's the only time when everyone else knows more than you. They know where to stand. They know which bunks are claimed. They know which spaces belong to who. They know which conversations are safe and which ones will get you hurt. You don't. And jail doesn't forgive people who don't know. Somewhere down the tier, laughter breaks out. It's not friendly. It's sharp, quick, cutting. You freeze for a second, wondering if it's about you. That hesitation, that half-second pause, would be enough for someone experienced to notice. Inside jail, everything is observed. Your posture, your eye contact, how fast you respond, how confidently you move, especially on your first night. There's an unspoken hierarchy in every jail housing unit, whether it's a holding tank, a dorm, or a two-man cell. And you're at the bottom of it. Not because of your charges, not because of your background, not because of your size. You're at the bottom because you just arrived. You haven't been classified yet. You haven't aligned with anyone. You haven't proven you understand how things work. Until you do, you're unpredictable. And unpredictable people get tested. You sit down on the bunk slowly, trying not to make noise. The mattress barely cushions your weight. The metal frame vibrates slightly, sending a faint sound through the structure of the cell. Someone hears it. Someone always hears it. Here's what most people don't understand. Violence on the first night doesn't usually come from anger. It comes from evaluation. Inmates aren't always trying to hurt you. They're trying to see what happens if they push. Do you flinch? Do you respond? Do you look away? Do you apologize too fast? Every reaction is information. And information determines how the rest of your time inside will go. On the outside, avoiding conflict is usually the smart move. Inside jail, avoidance can be mistaken for fear. And fear attracts pressure. That's why the first night is so dangerous. Because the instincts that protect you in normal life can betray you behind bars. Someone calls out from a nearby cell. Not a threat. Not an insult. Just a comment. You don't know if you're supposed to respond. That pause, that moment of uncertainty, stretches longer than it should. And just like that, you fail the test you didn't even know you were taking. Jail is not prison. That difference matters. Prison has routine. Structure. Stability. Jail is chaos. People are detoxing. People are angry. People don't know how long they'll be there. Mental health crises happen in real time, out in the open. Everyone is tense. And your first night drops you into that tension completely unprepared. The lights never fully turn off. Even during lights out, there's always enough illumination to remind you where you are. Enough light to cast shadows on the wall. Enough light to keep sleep shallow and broken. Every sound pulls you back awake. Every movement feels like a threat. Exhaustion sets in fast. And exhaustion makes mistakes more likely. By morning, things begin to shift. You've been seen. You've been placed, mentally, if not officially. The worst uncertainty is over. But whatever happened on that first night, good or bad, has already shaped how others see you. That's why inmates say the same thing, no matter where they're locked up. If you make it through the first night, you can make it through the rest. Because the first night isn't about strength. It's about awareness. And awareness is the one thing no one has when that door clicks shut for the first time. This documentary breaks down why the first night in a U.S. jail is the most dangerous, how inmates recognize it instantly, and what really happens before the system ever settles. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. The danger doesn't begin in the cell. It begins long before that. Before the uniform. Before the bunk. Before the door closes behind you. The danger starts at intake, the moment the outside world officially stops recognizing who you are. For most people, jail intake feels administrative, boring, slow, a blur of paperwork, fingerprints, and waiting. But inside the system, intake serves a very different purpose. It breaks momentum. On the outside, your life moves forward. You make choices. You control your pace. Even in moments of crisis, you're still deciding where to stand, when to speak, when to move. Intake removes that immediately. You wait because you're told to wait. You sit because someone points. You stand because someone shouts your name or number. This loss of agency is not accidental. It's the first stage of psychological compliance. And by the time you reach your first night behind bars, that compliance is already shaping how you behave and how others perceive you. The intake room is usually cold. Not dramatically cold, just enough to keep you uncomfortable. The kind of cold that makes you fold your arms inward, that subtly changes your posture. Posture matters inside jail. A lot. When officers instruct you to remove your personal belongings, it happens quickly and without ceremony. Wallet, phone, jewelry, shoes, belt. Each item disappears into a tray or bag that you won't see again for hours, days, or sometimes months. With every item removed, something else goes with it. Your connection to the outside world weakens. Your sense of continuity breaks. Your identity begins to blur. You're no longer arriving from somewhere. You're being processed into something. The questions come next. Name, date of birth, charges. Some people answer too quickly. Nervous, trying to be cooperative, trying to get through it. Others hesitate, confused, overwhelmed, already struggling to orient themselves. Neither reaction helps. Inside the system, speed doesn't equal safety. Clarity does. But clarity is hard to maintain when you're exhausted, stressed, and unsure of what comes next. An intake is designed to keep you unsure. After the paperwork, there's usually waiting. Sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. You sit on a hard bench or stand against a wall with others who are just as lost as you are. Some are quiet. Some talk too much. Some are already angry. This is your first exposure to jail's emotional volatility. Unlike prison, jail holds people at every stage of crisis. Fresh arrests, withdrawal, mental health breakdowns. People who don't know if they're going home tomorrow or staying for months. There is no emotional baseline. And being surrounded by instability makes it harder to regulate yourself, especially on your first night. Then come the searches, sometimes quick, sometimes invasive. Regardless of how they're conducted, they reinforce the same message. Your body is no longer private. That realization lands differently for different people. Some shut down, some tense up, some crack jokes they'll regret later. Every reaction is watched, not just by officers, but by other inmates passing through the same space. Because intake is one of the few places where newcomers see each other before housing. First impressions form here, and those impressions carry forward. Classification doesn't happen immediately. Despite what people think, you're not instantly sorted into a perfectly matched environment. Jail moves too fast for that. Instead, you're placed where there's room. Holding cells, temporary dorms, overflow units. This randomness is one of the reasons the first night is so dangerous. You might end up next to someone detoxing violently, someone unstable, someone aggressive, someone who has nothing to lose. None of you chose to be there together, but you're there anyway. When you're finally escorted toward housing, fatigue has already set in. You've been awake too long. You haven't eaten properly. Your stress hormones are elevated. Physiologically, this is when judgment drops. Reaction time slows. Awareness narrows. Small mistakes become more likely. And inside jail, small mistakes don't stay small. The walk to housing is short, but it feels longer. Doors buzz open. Close behind you. Buzz open again. Each door separates you further from anything familiar. By the time you reach the unit, you're not thinking clearly anymore. You're thinking about survival, even if you don't consciously realize it yet. This is where the system hands you off. From staff control to inmate observation. Officers open the door, gesture you inside, and move on. No speech, no orientation, no explanation. From that moment on, your safety depends less on rules and more on perception. The people inside the unit know exactly what intake does to a person. They felt the confusion, the exhaustion, the disorientation, and they know that newcomers are at their most vulnerable right now. That's why the first night is dangerous. Not because everyone is violent, but because everyone is alert. They're watching how you enter, how you hold your bedding, how you scan the room. Do you look lost? Do you hesitate? Do you make eye contact too long or not long enough? These details seem meaningless on the outside. Inside jail, there's signals. Intake strips away context. On the outside, people understand you through history, your job, your family, your reputation. Inside jail, context doesn't exist yet. All anyone sees is what you present in the first few minutes. And those minutes often happen on your first night. There's a moment, right after you step into housing, when everything slows down. The noise, the movement, the energy. It's not real stillness. It's assessment. People are deciding where you fit. And until that decision is made, you exist in a kind of social limbo. Unclaimed, untested, unknown. That's the most dangerous position in jail. This chapter matters because it explains something crucial. By the time you reach your first night behind bars, the danger has already been set in motion. Not by inmates, not by violence, but by a system that disorients you before you ever reach the cell. In the next chapter, we'll move fully into the housing unit and break down what happens during that first night, when observation turns into action and mistakes stop being theoretical. The moment you step into the housing unit, the atmosphere changes. Intake was cold, procedural, and controlled by staff. Housing is warm, loud, and controlled by people who live there. That transition happens instantly. One step forward, and the rules shift, even though no one explains them. The door buzzes open. You walk in holding your bedding. The officer gestures you forward and turns away. The door closes behind you. And just like that, the system removes itself from the equation. You are no longer being processed. You are being observed. The first thing you notice is the noise. It isn't constant yelling like movies suggest. It's layered sound. Overlapping conversations, metal clanging, someone laughing too loudly, someone else pacing, a television blaring in the distance. The noise isn't random. It's territorial. Every sound marks space. Every voice signals presence. The people who have been here longer understand exactly where they fit within that soundscape. You don't, and your silence stands out more than you realize. Housing units vary, dorms, pods, two-man cells, but the social mechanics are the same. There are claimed areas, certain bunks, certain tables, certain corners of the room. No signs mark them. No labels explain them. You're expected to know. And when you don't, people notice. Your first instinct is to scan the room. That instinct is natural and risky. Looking around too much can signal fear. Looking around too little can signal arrogance. You don't know that yet. All you know is that everyone else seems to know exactly where they're going. They move with purpose. They don't hesitate. They don't ask questions. And that contrast immediately separates you from them. The housing unit runs on a hierarchy that isn't written anywhere. It's based on time, reputation, alliances, and behavior. And newcomers always enter at the bottom. Not because they deserve it, but because the system needs to know where to place them. That placement doesn't happen through conversation. It happens through observation and pressure. You stand there for a moment longer than you should, just long enough for someone to notice. Someone always does. They don't rush you. They don't confront you immediately. They simply register your presence. And from that point on, you're being evaluated. One of the most dangerous misconceptions about jail is that violence is constant. It isn't. Most of the time, jail operates on tension, not action. And tension is most intense when something new enters the environment. That something is you. People watch how you handle your bedding. Do you clutch it tightly? Do you let it drag on the floor? Do you seem unsure where to go? These details might feel insignificant on the outside. Inside, they suggest mindset. Someone who clutches their bedding looks anxious. Someone who drags it looks careless. Someone who hesitates looks lost. None of those impressions help you on your first night. Eventually, someone speaks. It might be a question. It might be a comment. It might sound casual. Where are you coming from? You knew? That bunk's taken. The words themselves matter less than how you respond. Your tone, your timing, your posture, all of it is data. This is where many first-night mistakes happen. People either say too much or too little. They explain themselves. They apologize unnecessarily. They overshare details about their charges or their personal lives. Or they shut down completely, refusing to engage at all. Both extremes create problems. Talking too much invites scrutiny. Inside jail, information is currency. And on your first night, you don't know what's safe to share. Saying the wrong thing to the wrong person can shape how others see you for weeks. Saying nothing at all can make you look uncooperative or scared. Neither impression is neutral. The people watching you understand something you don't yet. Your first night is the only time you're truly untested. After tonight, people will already have an opinion. That's why the pressure happens early. Testing doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes it's humor at your expense. Sometimes it's a boundary push. Sometimes it's someone standing a little too close. They're not trying to start a fight. They're trying to see how you respond to discomfort. Do you assert yourself calmly? Do you back away immediately? Do you overreact? Each reaction moves you up or down the mental ranking system that exists in every unit. Another mistake newcomers make is assuming staff presence equals safety. It doesn't. Officers cycle in and out. Their attention shifts. Their priority is order, not individual protection. Inside housing, inmate dynamics operate continuously, even when staff are nearby. Especially on the first night. You finally find a place to sit or a bunk that isn't immediately challenged. You move carefully, trying not to disturb anyone. But even settling in is a signal. Do you sit confidently? Do you fidget? Do you keep scanning the room? People notice, and they draw conclusions. Sleep doesn't come easily. Even if the lights dim, the unit never fully rests. Someone is always awake. Someone is always moving. Someone is always watching. Your body is exhausted, but your mind refuses to shut down. Every sound feels amplified. Every movement feels intentional. And exhaustion makes judgment worse. That's why the first night is when conflicts escalate fastest. People are tired. People are tense. People are already emotional. And newcomers absorb all of that energy without understanding it. There's also another factor at play on the first night: desperation. Jail holds people who don't know how long they'll be there. Some are fighting charges. Some are withdrawing from substances. Some are mentally unstable. That volatility concentrates in housing units, and newcomers often become the focal point. Not because they're weak, but because they're unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things disrupt balance. By the middle of the night, most people have decided one thing about you. Maybe that you're quiet. Maybe that you're respectful. Maybe that you're unsure. That decision shapes how tomorrow will go. Because jail doesn't reset impressions easily. Here's the reality inmates understand better than anyone else. Your first night isn't about proving toughness. It's about avoiding mistakes that can't be undone. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to impress. You need to survive the evaluation phase. And that phase happens fast. By morning, the unit feels different. Not calmer, just settled. You're no longer the unknown variable. You're no longer the newest thing in the room. But whatever you showed on your first night, confidence, hesitation, awareness, fear, has already been absorbed into the unit's social memory. That's why inmates say the first night matters more than any other. Because it's the only night where everything is undecided. In the next chapter, we'll We'll break down the specific mistakes people make on their first night, the ones that seem harmless on the outside, but trigger serious consequences behind bars. Most people don't get hurt on their first night because they're weak. They get hurt because they act like they're still outside. Jail doesn't punish ignorance gently. It punishes it immediately. And the first night is when ignorance is at its peak. The first mistake is talking too much. On the outside, talking is how you reduce tension. You explain yourself. You clarify. You show you're not a threat. Inside jail, explanations sound like excuses. Newcomers often overshare because they're nervous. They talk about where they're from, what happened during the arrest, why they don't really belong here. Sometimes they even talk about their charges, thinking honesty will earn respect. It doesn't. Information is power in jail. And on your first night, you don't know who's listening, who's connected to who, or how what you say might travel through the unit by morning. Talking too much doesn't make you relatable. It makes you readable. And being readable means being predictable. The second mistake is apologizing too fast. This one surprises people. On the outside, apologizing de-escalates situations. It shows maturity. It signals cooperation. Inside jail, quick apologies can be read as submission. If someone bumps into you and you immediately apologize, even when it wasn't your fault, you've just sent a message. Not that you're polite, but that you're willing to take blame without resistance. That doesn't make the situation safer. It invites more pressure. Because now the question becomes, how much more will you tolerate? Another common mistake is avoiding eye contact completely. New arrivals often keep their heads down, thinking invisibility equals safety. It doesn't. Avoiding eye contact can signal fear, shame, or uncertainty. And while constant staring is aggressive, total avoidance makes you look unsure of your place. Inside jail, people expect controlled awareness, brief acknowledgement, neutral expression, then disengagement. Too much or too little attention both stand out. And standing out on your first night is dangerous. Then there's the mistake people don't even realize they're making. Moving too carefully, walking slowly, hesitating before sitting, second-guessing where to stand. These movements aren't wrong on the outside. Inside, they mark you as unfamiliar with the environment. That unfamiliarity tells others you don't know the rules yet. And people who don't know the rules get tested. Some newcomers make the opposite mistake, overcompensating. They puff up their chest. They speak louder than necessary. They try to project toughness immediately. This backfires fast. Jail already has a hierarchy. When someone new enters and tries to skip steps, it's seen as disrespect. You don't establish strength by announcing it. Inside, strength is assumed, until proven otherwise. Overcompensation puts a target on you because it invites someone to challenge that image. And challenges rarely stay verbal. Another first-night mistake is sitting in the wrong place. This sounds trivial, but it isn't. Certain bunks, benches, and tables are informally claimed. There are no signs, no labels, just understanding. Sitting in the wrong spot isn't just a seating error, it's a territorial violation. And on your first night, you don't know which spaces are neutral and which ones are protected. That's why people sometimes get confronted without understanding why. From their perspective, nothing happened. From the unit's perspective, a boundary was crossed. Newcomers also misunderstand silence. They assume silence means safety. But silence can be interpreted in different ways. Are you quiet because you're respectful? Or quiet because you're scared? Or quiet because you're hiding something? Without context, silence becomes ambiguous. And ambiguity makes people uncomfortable. On the first night, discomfort draws attention. One of the most dangerous mistakes is misreading humor. Jail humor is sharp, dry, and often aggressive. A comment that sounds like a joke may actually be a test. A laugh might not be friendly. A nickname might not be harmless. New arrivals sometimes laugh along too quickly, trying to fit in. Or they take offense too fast, responding defensively. Both reactions can escalate situations that weren't meant to escalate, or fail tests that were meant to measure restraint. Another mistake is assuming staff intervention is immediate. Newcomers often believe that if something happens, officers will step in instantly. That assumption is dangerous. Officers are not inside the social layer of the unit. They respond to disruptions, not tensions. Most first-night conflicts happen quietly. A few words, a step too close, a look held too long. By the time staff notice, the social outcome has already been decided. Sleep itself becomes a risk factor. Exhaustion lowers impulse control. It shortens tempers. It slows thinking. On the first night, people are running on adrenaline and stress hormones. That's why arguments escalate faster. That's why misunderstandings turn physical. That's why people react in ways they wouldn't normally react. The environment amplifies every mistake. What inmates understand, and newcomers don't, is that nothing on the first night is random. People don't bump into you by accident. Comments aren't always casual. Questions aren't just curiosity. Everything serves a purpose. Sometimes that purpose is harmless, figuring out who you are. Sometimes it's strategic, figuring out how you'll respond under pressure. And sometimes it's corrective, reminding you where you stand. By the end of the first night, most mistakes can't be erased. You can't take back something you said. You can't undo a reaction that labeled you. You can't rewind a moment where fear or anger showed. That's why inmates say the first night sets the tone. Not officially, not permanently, but socially. And social reality inside jail carries real consequences. In the next chapter, we'll examine how inmates read newcomers, what signals they look for, and how decisions are made, often silently, about who is left alone and who is pressured. In jail, very little is said out loud. That's the first thing newcomers misunderstand. Most decisions aren't announced. Most judgments aren't verbalized. Most outcomes aren't debated. They're inferred. And the first night is when those inferences begin. People inside jail learn to read others out of necessity. They read posture because posture reveals confidence or uncertainty. They read movement because movement shows familiarity or hesitation. They read tone because tone exposes fear, aggression, or control. These skills aren't taught. They're developed through repetition, conflict, and survival. By the time someone has been inside for weeks or months, they can spot a first-night mistake instantly, sometimes within seconds. The first thing inmates assess is self-awareness. Do you seem conscious of your surroundings? Do you understand when to engage and when not to? Do you move like someone who knows they're being watched? Self-awareness doesn't mean paranoia. It means calibration. People who lack it stand out fast. They bump into others without noticing. They sit where they shouldn't. They speak at the wrong volume. None of these are crimes on the outside. Inside jail, they're indicators. The second thing inmates look for is emotional control. Not calmness, control. You can be quiet and still be emotionally unstable. You can be loud and still be composed. What matters is whether your reactions are predictable. Do you snap when challenged? Do you shrink under pressure? Do you laugh nervously at the wrong moments? Emotional volatility is dangerous in jail. People who can't regulate themselves attract attention, not because they're bad people, but because they're unpredictable. And unpredictability disrupts balance. Another major signal is how you respond to being sized up. This happens subtly. Someone might stand closer than necessary. Someone might ask a question that doesn't need answering. Someone might comment on your appearance or behavior. These aren't random. They're proximity tests. Do you tense up? Do you step back immediately? Do you overcorrect by getting aggressive? Each response tells a story. Inmates aren't looking for domination. They're looking for information. One of the most misunderstood aspects of jail culture is respect. Respect isn't politeness. It isn't friendliness. And it definitely isn't submission. Respect in jail means acknowledging boundaries, yours and theirs, without making a spectacle of it. People who beg for respect don't get it. People who demand it get challenged. People who quietly maintain it are usually left alone. On the first night, inmates are watching to see which category you fall into. Charges matter less than people think, especially early on. On the first night, most people don't know what you're in for yet. What they know is how you carry yourself. And that carries more weight initially than paperwork ever will. Someone calm but alert is read differently than someone loud and nervous. Someone observant but reserved is read differently than someone silent and withdrawn. These impressions form before conversations ever get serious. Inmates also assess social awareness. Do you understand who's talking to who? Do you recognize informal leaders without being told? Do you avoid inserting yourself into conversations that don't involve you? Social blindness is risky. It leads to accidental disrespect. And accidental disrespect is still disrespect, especially on your first night, when patience is thin. There's also a deeper layer of observation happening. People are watching to see if you're desperate. Desperation shows in small ways. Asking too many questions, offering favors too quickly, trying too hard to be liked. Desperation signals vulnerability. And vulnerability doesn't always attract sympathy. Sometimes it attracts pressure. Inmates also notice how you handle stillness. Can you sit quietly without looking uncomfortable? Can you rest without constantly scanning the room? Can you exist in the space without trying to disappear? Comfort in stillness suggests confidence. Discomfort suggests anxiety. And anxiety spreads. People don't want anxiety spreading in a closed environment. One of the most important signals on the first night is consistency. Do your words match your behavior? Does your posture change dramatically depending on who's nearby? Are you steady or reactive? Inconsistency raises flags. Someone inconsistent today might be unpredictable tomorrow, and unpredictability forces others to adapt. Most people inside jail prefer stability over chaos. Here's the part outsiders rarely understand. Most inmates don't want trouble. They want routine. They want predictability. They want to do their time with minimal disruption. That's why the first night matters so much. New arrivals represent unknown variables, and unknown variables are either stabilized or pushed out of balance. By the end of the first night, most inmates have quietly placed you into a mental category. Low risk, neutral, potential problem. That classification isn't permanent, but it shapes how people interact with you going forward. Who speaks to you? Who ignores you? Who watches you more closely? All of it starts with how you're read on night one. The dangerous part is that none of this is explained. No one tells you what signals you're sending. No one corrects you verbally. No one gives feedback. You only experience the consequences. That's why inmates say the first night decides more than people realize. Because by the time you understand what's happening, the reading has already been done. In the next chapter, we'll examine what happens when the reading goes wrong, how pressure escalates, how conflicts form quietly, and why some first nights end in violence while others don't. Most first nights don't explode. They compress. That's what makes them dangerous. Violence in jail rarely starts with shouting or threats. It starts with pressure, slow, quiet, deliberate pressure, applied to someone who doesn't yet understand what's happening. And that pressure almost always targets newcomers first. Pressure begins subtly. Someone sits closer than necessary. Someone blocks a pathway just a second too long. Someone asks a question that isn't really a question. None of it is dramatic. All of it is intentional. The goal isn't to provoke a fight, at least not yet. The goal is to see how much space you think you're allowed to occupy. Most first-night violence isn't personal. It isn't about hatred or revenge. It's about correction. Someone believes you're misaligned with the unit's balance. Too loud, too nervous, too unaware, too defiant, or too vulnerable. Pressure is applied to push you back into alignment. If you adjust correctly, the pressure fades. If you don't, it escalates. Escalation doesn't happen all at once. It follows a pattern. First comes attention. You notice the same person watching you more often, standing closer, responding to things you didn't say out loud. Then comes engagement. Comments become more direct. Questions come faster. Your responses are interrupted or dismissed. Finally comes challenge. A boundary is crossed openly. Your space is entered deliberately. Your reaction is tested in front of others. At each stage, the unit is watching. Not just the people involved, everyone. This is the moment where first nights diverge. Some people de-escalate without realizing it. They respond calmly. They hold their ground without aggression. They don't overreact, and they don't collapse. The pressure eases. Others make one critical mistake. They react emotionally. Emotional reactions change everything. Raising your voice, insulting someone publicly, backing down too quickly in front of witnesses. Each response sends a signal, and signals travel fast inside jail. Once the unit believes a situation is unstable, others get involved, not always physically, but socially. Sides begin to form. Attention sharpens. What started as pressure becomes a moment. Another factor that drives first-night violence is audience. People behave differently when others are watching. If pressure is applied privately, it often stays controlled. If it happens publicly, in a common area, near bunks, in line, the stakes rise. Backing down in public can damage someone standing. Escalating in public can restore it. That's why some confrontations happen late at night, when exhaustion lowers control and reactions become unpredictable. Substances play a role too. Jail holds people in withdrawal, intoxication, or mental health crisis. On the first night, these states collide. Someone detoxing may misinterpret tone. Someone unstable may escalate without warning. Someone angry about their charges may redirect that anger. Newcomers often become the focus because they're unfamiliar, not because they caused anything. There's also a dangerous myth that violence is random. It isn't. Even when it seems sudden, it usually follows a sequence of signals that went unnoticed or misunderstood. A look held too long. A comment ignored. A boundary crossed unintentionally. On the outside, these moments would be forgettable. Inside jail, they accumulate. When violence does happen on the first night, it's often brief. A shove, a strike, a sudden burst of movement. It doesn't need to be prolonged to be effective. The message is sent quickly, and once it's sent, the unit adjusts around it. That's another reason the first night is dangerous. Consequences are immediate, and recovery is slow. What most newcomers don't realize is that violence is rarely the goal. It's the last tool used when pressure fails. Most inmates would rather avoid it. Violence brings attention. Attention brings lockdowns. Lockdowns disrupt routine. But if someone believes a boundary must be enforced and other methods haven't worked, violence becomes acceptable, especially early on. By morning, the unit settles again. Whatever happened is absorbed into the social structure. People know who stood their ground, who overreacted, who folded. That knowledge shapes future interactions, and it all traces back to the first night. This is why inmates say the first night matters more than any other. Not because everyone is violent, but because everything is fluid. Roles aren't set yet. Expectations aren't fixed yet. Reputations are still forming. Once that window closes, movement becomes harder. In the final chapter, we'll step back and explain how some people survive the first night without ever being targeted, not through toughness or luck, but through awareness, restraint, and understanding the environment they've been placed into. By the time morning comes, most people don't realize what they've already survived. There's no announcement, no marker, no moment where someone tells you, you made it. The unit simply wakes up. The lights brighten slightly. Footsteps move with more purpose. Voices sound steadier than they did hours before. And just like that, the most dangerous night is over. The first night behind bars doesn't leave bruises on everyone, but it leaves impressions on everyone. Some impressions are invisible. Some are permanent. All of them matter. Because jail isn't just a place where people are confined. It's a place where people are read. And the first night is when that reading begins. What makes the first night so dangerous isn't violence alone. It's uncertainty. You don't know the rules yet. You don't know the people yet. You don't know what matters and what doesn't. Everyone else does. That imbalance is where danger lives. Not in chaos, but in awareness gaps. By now, you understand something most people on the outside never think about. The system doesn't wait for you to adjust. The environment doesn't pause while you learn. The social order doesn't explain itself. It watches, and it responds. Some people get through their first night without incident. Not because they're tougher, not because they're lucky, but because they stay aware. They don't rush. They don't disappear. They don't perform. They observe before reacting. They respect boundaries without announcing it. They move carefully, but not fearfully. And most importantly, they understand one thing. The first night isn't about proving who you are. It's about not proving the wrong thing. Others aren't so fortunate. They speak when silence would have helped. They retreat when steadiness was needed. They react emotionally when control mattered most. And those reactions don't vanish with the night. They follow. Because inside jail, memory is social. People remember how you arrived, how you handled pressure, how you carried yourself when no one explained the rules. Those memories shape your days, your interactions, and sometimes your safety. The first night is dangerous because it's the only time when everything is undecided. After that, labels form. Expectations settle. Boundaries harden. Change becomes slower. That's why inmates talk about the first night with such seriousness. Not because they want to scare people, but because they remember it. They remember the confusion, the exhaustion, the fear of not knowing what mattered. They remember how quickly things could have gone wrong. And they remember how much was decided before they ever fell asleep. This documentary wasn't meant to glorify violence. It was meant to explain something most people never see. That danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. That power doesn't always show itself aggressively. That survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes, survival is about understanding the environment faster than it can break you. If there's one truth to take away from this, it's this. Your first night behind bars isn't dangerous because jail is full of violent people. It's dangerous because it's full of people who are watching how you move, watching how you react, watching to see if you understand where you are. And on that first night, understanding is the rarest thing of all. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.